Ladies and gentlemen, I am tremendously pleased and happy to be able to welcome you to this Braver Angels member meeting. And I want to take a few minutes just to orient us around what we are doing and why we are here. Now, many of you, if not most of you, are Braver Angels members. Some of you likely follow our emails and have an understanding more or less of what Braver Angels does, but you might have more questions about who we are, what we do, and why we do it, for that matter. Everybody is welcome. Let me just say that. We are moving towards reinstituting Braver Angels member meetings as a regular sort of part of the cadence of Braver Angels community coming together to give us the opportunity to stay up to speed on the work of the organization. But I would say even more importantly, to give us a regular opportunity to keep in touch with each other. Some of you have been with us long enough to remember the days in which Braver Angels meetings were entirely in person. Used to be the case that all of our workshops just about were face-to-face. We would have annual conventions where hundreds of us would gather, red and blue alike, from across America to spend 2 and 3 days together, participating in Braver Angels workshops, drafting our national platform, engaging with press, but really just getting to know our comrades in arms, so to speak, from across the country. Back in those days, 2018, 2019, we hardly did anything other than tinker with Zoom. Then with the lockdown, the pandemic, it became the main way in which many of us have interacted. I'm very happy to see that we are beginning to step back out onto solid ground, but Zoom remains an important part of what we do. And so given that fact, why not use the tool in a way to bring us all together a bit more regularly and a bit more often in terms of providing an open floor for members to be able to stay in touch regularly with the sort of wide-ranging work and activities of Braver Angels, and to be able to see one another on the screen. So I wanted to say that, and I also wanted to say this. A funny thing happened to me when I was sitting outside of the studio before coming in to set up for this call. I was sitting in my car in the driver's seat. I was just, I think, wrapping up a podcast or something, listening to a podcast, getting ready to get out and trek up here to do this. And somebody called my name, and I looked behind me, and it was a woman who looked vaguely familiar to me. And she said, "John," she said, "I'm your cousin." I said, "Really?" She's one of my extended relatives, from my mother's cousins, 2 or 3 times removed. She was someone I had met, I think, all of 2 times. Once was at a family reunion, and the other time was way back, in a former life when I was on the campaign trail. And she remembered me speaking at a church. And but apparently she's been following me on Facebook, and through that has been following Braver Angels for the last number of years now. I had no idea. And she said to me, she said that very few things give her hope in America today. Very few things give her hope. She said that, and I quote because it was so striking to me. She said, she said, when I look to the future, she said, I can't see it. She said, I can't see past the next election. She said, she doesn't know what's going to happen in America. Her vision is clouded. But she said, the things that you do, the things that we do at Braver Angels, she said, that's where I find hope. And so we're here today to talk about potentially a range of things. Our chief order of business here today is Braver Politics. And for those of you who don't know, who aren't familiar, Braver Politics is a serious initiative undertaken by Braver Angels volunteers and members across America to depolarize and to change the culture of American politics at every level of government, from Congress to state legislatures to municipalities, even to local school boards, in the context of our campaigns. We are mobilizing Americans across the country to bring Braver Angels workshops to elected officials, to candidates, and to bring candidates and elected officials into interaction with constituents who are organizing from across the divide for a more humanizing kind of democracy. And so we're going to hear much more about that in detail in just a moment. That's the specific item on the agenda. But more broadly speaking, I suspect that if you are interested in the work of Braver Angels, if you're committed to it, if you're a part of this community, what you've found yourself a part of is a movement that is giving people an ability to see what the future could be. People see what the future of American democracy could be in you, in those of us, both on this call in Braver Angels communities across the country, and far beyond Braver Angels, in every district, in every region, in every state, city, and county, where folks who are unsung in their generosity are nevertheless willing to reach out and recognize the humanity in their neighbors and their colleagues and coworkers and classmates across the divide. It is in those of us who are willing to humanize one another for the sake of a more perfect union that those of us who may feel discouraged about the future of American democracy can see forward with a cause for hope. And so that, as much as anything, is what brings us together here. Hope for the future and confidence in one another. And so I am once again very grateful to have you all here, grateful to welcome you to what I hope to be just the first of an ongoing monthly membership program, monthly member meeting that will allow us to keep in better contact with each other. And as we proceed past our updates here, we'll move into questions and answers and comments that'll give each of you the opportunity, well, as much as we have time to hear from you folks, time is limited, so I should be brief, but we will soon turn turn the microphone over to you. But before we do that, I'd like to go ahead and turn over to our panel of Braver Angels leaders to give us some updates and an overview of this initiative that we're referring to as Braver Politics. And so, Randy, why don't you kick us off and let folks know what Braver Politics is about and what's happening in the field.
Great, John. Yeah, thanks so much. And I'm really excited to be here. So if you don't know me, I'm director of events for Braver Angels. I've been with the organization since about 2017. And I, in addition to events like this, I work with a lot of our strategic partners and clients on custom events. And then in 2020, when COVID hit and we had to lock down, I helped to lead the migration to online events. And now I'm actually helping to lead our foray into hybrid events. And we've got a little treat later on to give you a taste of that. So I'm really excited about that. But what I'm really excited about is Braver Politics. We've done so much work on building our grassroots network, right? We have over 11,000 members. We have over 50,000 subscribers. And we have over 1,500 volunteers who are setting up events around the country. And 27,000 people, roughly, have registered for those events in the past few years. And that's just a really exciting success rate, right? So we also have 77 local alliances around the country right now, which gives us just a really powerful grassroots network. We've had so much success in helping people to depolarize on a personal level. But, we are seeing these days just constant evidence of gridlock among our elected officials, right? There's an atmosphere of demonization and blame that those folks exist within. And it really makes it a miserable job. Elected officials are not enjoying their jobs very much in this day and age. And I'm not just talking about on the national level, right? Local officials down to school boards are dealing with politics in places that they've never seen it before, right? And even in nonpartisan roles on nonpartisan city councils or school boards, they are seeing politicization that is really difficult to deal with. And so what we really want to do is bring our grassroots success to the grass tops, right? We want to help leaders communicate with each other and communicate with their constituents. And it's just so important that that conversation between leaders and constituents, staffs, everyone, the conversation around the country continues so we can actually make progress on all the things that we want to. Many of you might have seen the newsletter that I wrote this past weekend about this very issue, right? If we don't continue the conversation then we will grind to a halt as a country. And so that's what we're about at Braver Angels. It's about continuing the conversation. So that's why we created Braver Politics. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit more specifically. So what is Braver Politics? Well, it's citizen volunteers and Braver Angels grassroots organizers that we talked about having so many of, working together to provide evidence-based opportunities for officials, for political candidates, for their staffs across the country at every level, at the local, the state, the federal level, to gain the skills and make the commitments, really importantly, right? To communicate constructively, to find common ground, and to disagree respectfully across that partisan divide, right? So the whole idea here is to build trust among elected officials, candidates, between those folks and voters, right? It is all about trust. And the end goal is an America where citizens trust elected officials, where voters in both parties trust elections, and where our political institutions reflect the spirit of citizenship and common purpose, right? Earlier today, I talked to Dan Carnese, who is another of the leaders in the Braver Politics program. And he couldn't be here tonight, but he wanted to emphasize the data-driven approach to Braver Politics, and that they are collecting information on what's succeeding and what's not, right? And they want to be really responsive, evolving events in response to that data. So no matter how far we get this year, it's really the beginning of a multi-year effort, right? So with that, I want to turn things over to his colleague and mine, Elizabeth Dahl, who is the director of Braver Politics. So Elizabeth, take it away.
Everyone, I am Elizabeth, as Randy mentioned, National Director of the Braver Politics Initiative. And I am going to talk to you a little bit about what Braver Politics is. We have two tracks. It includes workshops and public-facing events. The two tracks of Braver Politics are one, our quote unquote standard offerings for elected officials and candidates that are primarily put on and best put on by skilled Braver Angels members in local alliances. And these are workshops like our Red Blue workshops that are tailored for elected officials. It's our one-to-one conversations among public officials and staff. It's our Managing Difficult Conversations workshop. It's our deliberative town halls. Those are the heavier lift in facilitation. And so we're organizing those, and we're recruiting candidates and elected officials to participate in those workshops. And then the second track is called the Citizen Action Program. And that is training for all of these volunteers that we have from partnerships or from other places who aren't maybe plugged into an alliance. Maybe there is one near them, maybe there isn't one near them, but they really wholeheartedly agree with the Braver Angels mission, and they want to know how they can take action in their local communities. And so we train them to become essentially citizen political activists in their local communities for the cause of depolarization, to go out and recruit their local elected officials and candidates into Braver Politics workshops, to organize events, our candidate debates and neighbor conversations with a candidate, and to communicate to their local elected officials and their local candidates that they really desire a better, braver politics, that they really desire a politics where we understand each other and respect each other and can disagree agreeably and accurately without attacking exaggerated stereotypes or straw men. And so our workshops and public-facing events include trainings to help officials and staffers be more effective in their jobs, such as a recent workshop conducted by Bill Doherty on the Hill, which is a managing difficult phone conversations skills workshop, something that everyone who has ever worked on the Hill for a elected official, or anyone who's even worked on a political campaign that had any amount of controversy has experienced. And that is also going to be replicated by the Central Texas Alliance here in a little bit. And then additionally, we provide trainings for organizing and running better public meetings for our public officials, something that they always need and that is always helpful to them to ensure that they're actually hearing a diverse set of perspectives from their community, and also both communicating with their constituents and hearing from their constituents in a way that ensures constituents feel heard, even if they still disagree at the end of the day, and helps the elected officials and public officials better communicate their own experiences and their own uh, opinion and views from the side of the local municipal, the city or the county or whatever their elected district is. Of course, public servants need our help with events like the town halls and debates that I mentioned earlier that the Citizen Action Program does. So many of them have devolved into shouting matches. We have revived debates into a format that ensures issues are collected from voters within the community, issues that are actually important to most voters in the community, and that questions are written in a way that reflects neutral politics instead of being written by either one side of the aisle or the other, and in a way that reflects, again, the issues that are important to the community rather than one particular segment of the community. We also have public events, the neighbor conversations with a candidate, constituent conversations, and many others. The neighbor conversations with a candidate being a small group conversation of 10 to 12 individuals, usually in someone's home, that get together to talk about the values and concerns that they have around issues of importance to them in a particular district. And they talk with the candidate about that. The candidate has an opportunity to hear them out and respond to them, and also to share a little bit about who they are and why they're running. And then in the second hour, they talk about causes of polarization and places that they've experienced polarization within their communities and what each one of them can do to actively take a stand against it and to actively inhibit polarization. And so we think that's a really great example of an event that almost everyone can, that candidates will want to do and that almost everyone can put on.
And
And
Elizabeth,
then,
would now be a good time to play those testimonials from people who experienced those neighbor conversations?
yes, exactly. I was just about to say, and Randy has some great videos of people who attended a neighbor conversation with a candidate in Virginia, and he's going to share some of those.
Had a wonderful time today at the Braver Angels Neighbor Conversations with a Candidate. It was actually my first time getting a chance to meet a political candidate face to face, so close up. I have attended a few very large campaign rallies, and I always felt very distant, but it really was great to see candidates. Sometimes we don't like politicians, we have negative stereotypes, but get a really good chance to feel that we've been heard and that we can actually give pretty good feedback to someone who could potentially be a member of Congress. So.
And I just wanted to say I thought it was a breath of fresh air to have 14 people in the room divided equally on opposite sides of the political aisle, and to be able to speak for 2 hours, consecutive hours, respectfully. Not a single swear word was uttered, not a single person was interrupted, and I wish that there could be more of this.
Those are just a couple of the wonderful examples of how we succeed at events. And I think I'll pass it back to Randy to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, so I wanted to introduce Doug Teschner, who is a great leader in the Braver Politics program. He has been leading and organizing workshops in New Hampshire. And so Doug, please go ahead and tell us about the work that you've been doing and the success that you've been seeing.
Oh, thanks, Randy. Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm Doug Teschner. I'm in New Hampshire. I'm New England regional leader for Braver Angels, a volunteer position like most of you. I have a background as a state legislator. So when the opportunity came up, even though I'd been out for 20 years and seen a lot of changes, when Braver Politics started up and some of our New Hampshire folks were really interested in that, I sort of stepped up. I reached out to the former speaker, and we were actually able to do a red-blue workshop. And at the beginning, we had 6 Republicans on one side of the room with no masks, 6 Democrats on the other side of the room. But by the end of 3 hours, with a little Bill Doherty magic, we got them really talking to each other. And these are just a few quotes that came out of that day. The first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. It's hard to demonize someone you have a personal relationship with. It's vital to get to know each other on a human scale. We made assumptions about other people's motives that are not always correct. So the power of that workshop was really quite incredible, particularly when we went into that workshop, people were kind of telling us good luck with that group. But you know, the follow-up is a challenge. But I did get a testimonial from one of the representatives, Representative Notter. It was a 6-term New Hampshire House of Representative member and Republican Majority Whip. She says, I've noticed some changes since our workshop. Some of us are making an effort to be friendlier to each other. A little kindness goes a long way. We've also up here in New Hampshire been organizing managing difficult conversations with voters workshops with election officials. You know, it's a tough role to be in any kind of office. Election officials vary from state to state, but they're all elected here in New Hampshire. And as we reached out and did a pilot project with them, and we're doing a series of 6 more workshops starting this week, these folks are really keen for help on how to manage difficult conversations when you get someone in your face. How do you handle that? And we're also talking with the Lebanon, New Hampshire City Council about organizing a similar workshop. So just 3 quick pieces of advice. You want to get in this work, build relationships. Connections are really important. Be persistent and follow up. And follow up is hard because there's a lot of forces out there that are driving polarization and are driving even these representatives we work to. They go back to their party bases and they say, you're talking to those people, why? So this is long-term work, but it's important work, and I really encourage you to look for an opportunity and join in. Thank you very much. Glad to be here tonight.
Great, thanks, Doug. And John, I'm going to toss it back to you to run the Q&A and comments.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you very much, Randy. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your incredible work, and Doug for your valuable testimony, and for giving us the benefits of your experiences in the field. Well done, my friend. So now what we want to do is turn it over to you good folks. And so there are a couple of ways in which we want to be able to field your questions, your comments. The main item on the agenda is Braver Politics. But if you have a question in another direction or a comment in another direction, feel free to voice it. Now, there are 2 things to say. Well, one, in terms of how we ask questions, we can do it the old-fashioned way. You can raise a hand, or you can click the raise hand button, which you'll find in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. And I see Mr. Martin is first in line. Okay, duly noted, sir. I didn't say go yet, but that's okay. That's okay. Initiative, early bird gets the worm, as they say. The other thing you can do is chat your question in the chat box. We have our whips, as we call them. I think they're identified as Q&A managers, Luke and Sasha. So if you look for Q&A, Luke or Sasha, you can chat a question to either of them. And now, if you want to read the question yourself, indicate that in the question. In other words, you can put in parentheses, you can write your question, then put in parentheses, will ask, or if you would prefer for us to simply read your question for you, you can say, please read, or words to those effects. You've got a couple of ways to do it, and we decided to do it 2 different ways because we know that some folks are kind of shy, but they still have plenty to offer the conversation. And the other thing I would like to say is that I certainly encourage folks to be somewhat concise, aim for about 30 to 30 seconds, 60 seconds or so. I'm not going to be militant about holding people to time parameters. We want this to be a flowing conversation, but I will cut folks off if necessary, just in the interest of getting as many voices in the conversation as possible. And let's see, last thing is, you just heard a lot of information about Braver Politics. Nobody expects you to have absorbed all of it. So if you have a question that you think may have been covered in the initial overview, but you're still unclear, don't let that stop you from asking it yourself. Okay, excellent. And so with that, let us go to our questions. Mr. Martin, I saw you first. Let's go ahead and unmute you and go ahead and ask your question and speak into the mic.
Thanks very much. I just would very much like to get involved. My question really is, how do I do that? Are you folks going to contact the people who are involved on this call, or will the local grouping contact me, or should I contact them? And if so, how do I find them? Just how do I get involved in participating in one of those conferences? And I'd love to help as a volunteer, obviously.
Indeed. Well, I think we have a pretty straightforward answer for you on that front, but Elizabeth, I'm going to let you go ahead and articulate that.
Thank you so much for that question. We would absolutely love to have you join us, and there are a couple of different ways that you can do so. If you would, are you connected with a local alliance? I'm sorry, I guess I don't know if he's allowed to unmute.
Oh,
I've just joined it a few weeks ago, and the answer is no. I know there is one in Westchester County, just north of New York City, which is where I am. I'm not quite sure how to actually reach them.
Okay, so there are 2 things that you can do. If you would like to get involved specifically with Braver Politics, you can join the Citizen Action Program. You can sign up to be a citizen volunteer, and I will find a link. Actually, that is just on the website. You can sign up to be a citizen volunteer, and then you can get added to a homeroom, and we'll also reach out to your local alliance and let them know that we have a citizen volunteer in their area. And you can be connected with them and go through the Citizen Action Program training to organize the neighbor conversations with a candidate and candidate debates, and learn how to recruit elected officials and candidates in your area. And then you can also start to gain experience with the broader array of Braver Angels programming and available curriculum. We have a bunch of stuff that we do, and we would love to have you explore and participate in whatever you are most interested in.
Thank you. You mentioned the
Just a note,
website. Is that the Braver Angel website, or do the Braver Politics have a special separate website?
They are located on the same website, but Braver Politics has a special sign up.
Special sign up.
Yep, and I just chatted a link to the sign up for Braver Politics. So look in the chat, and you can sign up there. And if you click on that link and you just scroll up a little bit, it'll give you more information about Braver Politics in general.
Thank you.
okay, there we go. Stephen Bartram, I see you next. And let's see, I guess I have to ask you to unmute in order for you to be unmuted. So let me do that. Okay, go ahead, my friend.
Am I off now?
You're on.
Good. I put a question in the box. You can answer that separately. But one of the things I used to teach, and so I've got this curriculum stuff in me, but I want to be quick. How do you organize workshops that teach the parts of a dialogue. And for example, how do you teach about how to ask neutral questions? How do you respond to those things? And how do you teach people to respond in a neutral way? I'll leave that. That's my question.
Yeah, absolutely. Randy, I'm going to ask you to weigh in a bit on that front, and it may be a good opportunity to speak a little bit about our Skills for Bridging the Divide workshop, but perhaps there's something you might want to say about that in the context of Braver Politics as well. I'm not sure, but Randy, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question, Stephen. You know, there is a common thread that flows through a lot of our training workshops. So Skills for Bridging the Divide, Polarizing Within, Families in Politics. We've got a lot of different versions. And the thread is, the idea is to connect first, and only then, only when you've connected and really made the person feel heard, do you want to actually offer your own perspective, right? And this is, I have used this so much in my own personal life, even outside of politics. It is just an incredibly effective technique, right? And so you'd asked about, you know, how you specifically do those things, and really, first of all, the most basic skill when it comes to bridging that divide is reflecting back to the person what you heard them say, right? But you got to make sure that you give them time to say, well, did they get it? Did I get it right? Right? Do I have the essence of what you've just told me, or do you want to modify it? Right? And then asking further questions, making sure that you're basically maintaining a curiosity stance, right? That you're always trying to understand their perspective and how they got to that. And only when you fully understand that should you feel comfortable kind of pivoting towards, all right, now I want to share my own perspective. And when you do that, what's really key is making sure that the person that you're talking to sees that you know that your perspective is inherently narrow. It is your own, right? You use I statements to say, well, this is what I believe, right? But also acknowledging that you have access to just a limited amount of information as a human being, right? Inherently. And so these are the basic ideas that we teach when it comes to connecting, so you can share your own perspective and fully understand somebody else's perspective. And of course, a lot of these threads, you know, flow through our Braver Politics workshops as well, right? So, you know, this stuff is very fundamental to the art of communicating. And so we really try to bake it into everything that we do, workshops and the rest of what our organization does as well.
Outstanding. Thank you very much for your question, Daniel, and for your answer, Randy. I'm going to go and pull one out of the chat now. And I'm realizing that there's a bit of an unanticipated logistical challenge in that, because somebody will chat a question. I'll say, oh, that's a good one. I listened to the answer to the last question. I look back and there's 5 more, and now I got to go back and find it. So I'm doing some copying and pasting. But we have a question from Imandisa. And she writes, as a candidate for Washington State Senate, how would I get involved in Braver Politics events and workshops? And so, Elizabeth, I think you may have said something about that in your remarks, but do you want to speak again specifically to the question of how candidates can get involved in Braver Politics?
Yes, there is also a specific candidate sign up for Braver Politics. And Randy, I don't know if you have that link handy, if you want to put that one into the chat. Otherwise, I'll go find it and send it over in a second. But
I can do that.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, we have a great sign up for candidates and elected officials. You'll go through just a few brief fields, let us know what your position is, or if you're a staff member, or what you're running for. And then you will also receive a list of our Braver Politics offerings and which ones you might be interested in participating in. And my email address to contact me to work on finding one that is near you or getting one organized around you.
Outstanding. Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Let's go next to Melinda Voss in St. Paul.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. I am already working with Braver Politics in Minnesota, and I think it's very wonderful and valuable. My question is, does do any of the Braver Politics workshops deal with helping candidates and elected officials deal with the extreme elements of the press?
Mm.
I guess my belief is that, as a journalist myself for many years and being around political journalists for many years, I see most elected officials as being really wanting to do the best for their constituents on both sides. And the same, I would say, with most of the reporters. They want to do the best for their readers and listeners on both sides. And so, but then there are some on the extremes. So is there anything in these Braver Politics workshops that helps candidates or elected officials deal with the extreme elements of the media? Because I think oftentimes they're the ones that get the attention and can pull some of these candidates who want to be fair-minded and civil.
Right.
And it's a crazy situation. So
yeah, indeed. Thank you very much for that question, Melinda. It's an excellent one. And I'll take a swing at this. We are not numb to the problem that you're pointing at. The part of our work is narrative based. And by that, I mean, generating content, engaging in public messaging in a way that allows us to sort of lift up the stories of the American people in a manner that allows us to see each other past the stereotypes. You're asking a particular question, which is, do we have resources that can be disseminated through Braver Politics to candidates and elected officials who want to operate in that spirit, but who find their job complicated by the polarizing sort of media complex? I do not believe that we have anything programmatically to that effect. Part of what we do have, which I think Elizabeth probably covered a bit, but part of what we do have and what Bill Doherty has innovated is programming related to enabling elected officials to engage more constructively with their constituents, including folks who may call on the phones and be very angry and be very polarized, right? I don't think we've developed anything in the direction of what you are talking about. That is not, however, to say that we may not be able to innovate something like that tomorrow and over the course of time. We are still just getting started with this initiative. And I think that while it is in motion, part of what we are also seeking to build through Braver Angels Media, and also just an expanding network of relationships with journalists, with broadcasters, and others, working with Braver Angels leaders like Monica Guzman and outlets like Gannett Publishing and so forth, is an effort to do in the level of media what we're also seeking to do on the level of government, which is to say, to shift the culture of the, sort of the mainstream, if you will, in a direction that is humanizing and depolarizing, rather than one which business model is about inflaming our passions against each other. So, but clearly we've got a lot of work to do. Doug, is there something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, could I jump in a little bit on that?
Okay, real quick, go for it.
Yeah, I think in Braver Angels, we're trying to do three things. One, we're trying to create space where people can have conversations about politics, where it's become so difficult. Secondly, we're trying to give people skills to deal with challenging situations, whether it's in family and other people And third, we're trying to create a movement for change. And I think this question really speaks to that last one. How do we create a movement for change when there are so many conflict entrepreneurs out there, people who are making money and power to divide us? And I think it's a wonderful question, and I think it's something we need to grapple with more in Braver Angels, and I appreciate the question.
Yeah, indeed. We are in agreement, Doug. Deborah Rappaport, I see you, and we'll come to you in short order. But before I do, I want to go ahead and read another question from the chat. And so June K wants to know, quote, with over 50% of Americans identifying as independents and those thinking well beyond the two political parties' stranglehold over our systems of self-governance, duopoly, Will braver politics include the voices of those unwilling to identify as either red or blue or are members of another political party? Thank you. And thank you very much, June, for that question. So let me go ahead and lean into that one. The short answer to that question, June, and everybody else who may be wondering this, because it is a fairly common question, the short answer here is that we already do. You do not have to be a self-identified Republican or Democrat or think of yourself as a liberal, progressive, or conservative, or what have you, in order to participate and be, a vital part of the work of Braver Angels and a fully fledged member of the community. There are perhaps one or two of our programs, including our Red Blue workshop, which is probably to this day our most well-known workshop model, that do rely on or do require participants to sort of identify in one direction or another. But in the vast main, there's nothing we do at Braver Angels that one is disqualified from participating in if one isn't independent, or if one sees him or herself as being sort of straight down the middle politically or affiliated with a third party. Having said that, I do want to acknowledge where the question comes from. Braver Angels, we set about seeking to bridge the partisan divide to depolarize American society. We do live in a two-party democracy, functionally speaking. That may change over time. I mean, there are folks out there seeking to innovate a way towards, a multi-party sort of system. Folks like Andrew Yang, who's been on the podcast, and many others. I really want to just telegraph for people the fact that Braver Angels is a home for independents. It is a home for folks who are registered libertarians, members of the Green Party, the American Independent Party, whatever the case may be. We are not at any point trying to shut anybody out of the conversation on the basis of you're not being Republican or Democrat. Far from it. And, it's true. People, I believe it is true that a plurality, at least, of Americans may actually be either registered independents or non-affiliated at this point. But I would also say, and I think I speak for us generally at Braver Angels, that there really is a salient problem at the heart of America's divisions that in a rough way sort of falls along the liberal conservative sort of divide in terms of the culture wars and the way the parties have ceased to work together, perhaps in a more congenial sort of way. And so we are trying to sort of minister to that, if you will. We are trying to respond to this big sort of, hemispheric breaking apart of the body politic, but let that not give anyone the impression that independents, non-affiliated folks and third parties are not just as vital a piece of the puzzle in terms of building a house united and bringing the American people back together. Okay, and now to you, Deborah Rappaport.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My questions have continued to develop as I as I listen. So when I put my hand on my own face disappeared. It threw me for a second. Sorry. One of my, a really straightforward question was just about the agenda and the flow of one of these typical meetings. But my kind of next level questions are around, are there limits to what is okay? My associate from Minnesota just made me think of this, where we've got a Republican endorsed candidate who's using, well, actually on both sides are using anti-Semitic tropes. Mm-hmm. And at some point, are there places where Braver Angels will say, no, you actually have crossed a line? Mm-hmm. And if so, what is that like? And just one more related question is that I've done a lot of teaching of how to stay in difficult conversations from the perspective of Jewish teachings and texts. And I always get thrown by the question, what if somebody doesn't want to play? What if somebody just says, nope, I'm not going to go by your rules? And I'm guessing that the people who self-select into a Braver Angels conversation or Braver Politics conversation is going to be willing to. but I'm just wondering if you have comments on that as well.
I do. And thank you for asking that question, Deborah. And let me just say, by way of entering into an answer to that, this is why I wanted, and this is why we wanted to have, this member meeting, and to make this more of a perhaps a routine going forward. I hear from so many of you every weekend, every other weekend, because I'll send out the newsletter time to time, and I'll do my best to sort of, in an even-handed way, sort of engage issues in the news, and so does Monica and Randy, and you hear us sort of wrestling with these things in the podcast, and our incredible leaders in the field doing likewise. But questions are hard, and certain questions are hard, and it's not always easiest to sort of, in an email response or a Facebook post, do justice to just how deep a question, such as the one you are asking, actually is. But here's the way I would respond to that, Deborah. I think that the key factor here is good faith at the end of the day. I think that the key issue here is good faith. There would be no need for braver politics, and there would be no need indeed for braver angels if we were, all of us, angels already, right? And the part of what's difficult is the fact that we are, as Americans, coming from vastly different, in many cases, cultural starting points and experiential, life journeys, right? Coming from different generations, different regions, different stories in terms of what the United States of America is actually about, what our history is, what it's meant to represent. I'm employing this term metaphorically, so don't take it as a religious sort of pronouncement, but to just pull something from my own tradition a little bit, this is sort of why grace matters. I think sort of a willingness to go into these conversations and say, as long as we are genuinely here to learn from each other and humanize each other, we are willing to take the risk that somebody may say something that may sort of cross somebody the wrong way, but we know that that's kind of why we're here in the first place, right? To get to know each other and to work through some of these tense differences, not just in what we think, but even in some of the ways in which we might speak, and to emerge better as a result of that. So I think that the only line that I believe we draw is with people who would seek to abuse our processes in order to advance an agenda that is decidedly divisive and not our own, right? And so that, to me, is the line that I would draw. But I'm very grateful for your question. Okay, let's see. Who next? Forgive me, folks. I have no idea whose hand was up first or second or third at this point. I just sort of see them scattered about. So I'm going to more or less call them as I see them. Let's go to Josh Klein, and then we'll take another one from the chat box. Okay, go ahead, Josh.
Hello, thank you. Two quick things. I did the orientation for Braver Politics, and it's the next step is to register for something that's already happened. So I don't know if you're going to update that to add new orientations, so that if we've done it now, we can join those. And then my second question, I don't know how, and I know this is new, but I'm wondering if you're willing to share any data on how many people have signed up for Braver Politics, how many candidates or elected officials have signed up, and if there's any in particular that you're very encouraged by or that have been very engaged with the process.
Sure. I'm going to take a step back and let Elizabeth respond to those points. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
So the live orientation, yes. Actually, I was just messaging someone else via DM to let them know that I had actually tried a couple of weeks ago to schedule orientations out till the end of July. And I'm not sure if it was a user issue on my end or if something happened with the technology. I was kind of in a spotty internet connection when I was doing it. But I've reached out to my IT guy to figure out what happened. And regardless of what the resolution is, we will have more part 2 orientations up on the calendar in the next 2 days. And then the other part of that is that yes. So I can't tell you exactly how many people have signed up for Braver Politics because only the Citizen Action Program portion has a unique sign up. But I can tell you that we have had over 300 people express interest in the Citizen Action Program through the sign up. And I can tell you that we have had, give me just 1 second here. We have had, oh, I'm sorry, not over 300. We're up to nearly 500 now that have expressed interest in the Citizen Action Program. And we have had 50 politicians, elected officials, and staff members so far that have gone through the Braver Politics sign up. I can't quickly and really easily tell you which of them were what type of staff or elected or candidate, but we have 50 politicians, elected officials, and staff that have gone through the elected official sign up, and we have almost 500 individuals that have gone through the Citizen Action Program sign up.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And I'm going to take another live question here while I fight through my very busy chat box here to to pull up another one to read. So don't worry, you chatters out there. I will pull another one from that pot shortly. But next, let's go to. Am I getting this right? Dace Hines, is that right? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me ask you to unmute there. Okay.
There we go. Yeah, you got it. No, well
where
done.
are you at, brother? You've got an interesting locale going on.
Yeah, I'm in a little camper van that I built over the course of the pandemic. It's a little grand caravan, and when San Francisco rent became too much to afford, I decided to downsize, and so I've been pretty nomadic for a couple of years now.
Okay.
And actually, that kind of partly ties into my question, which is, I just so believe in the work that Braver Angels is doing. I'm involved in a lot of different kind of areas around having difficult conversations in other parts of my life. And I've got some facilitation experience. And my question is, as a part-time volunteer who is pretty nomadic, what would you consider is going to be the most needed or highest impact volunteer role that I could contribute to Braver Angels?
Mm-hmm.
So, I split my time between Arizona, where I grew up, and California, where I've been based over the past 10 years. And I know there's a million ways to get involved, but I'm just curious to know where you see where should I be concentrating on volunteer, getting involved as a volunteer? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dace. And I saw Lydia McCloskey enthusiastically seconding your question. So it seems like you're not the only one. Randy, Elizabeth, Doug, would either of you, who wants to take a swing at that one?
I'm happy to comment on this. There's so many ways that people can get involved. I mean, we definitely have a need for ambassadors. And so if you are passionate about the cause of Braver Angels, there is a program that you can access on our website where you can get trained to basically introduce Braver Angels to as many audiences as you can access. So that's one way to go. Our moderator program is somewhat selective. We do want you to have a little facilitation experience in the past, but if you do, we definitely encourage you to apply to that. And if you are trained as a moderator, we actually had this program called the Flying Angels, where alliances or organizations, parts of the organization that need a moderator but don't necessarily have a trained one locally, can request for someone to travel. It looks like you have van must travel, so that's great. And I would definitely encourage you to be part of that program as well. But there's so many other things, like Braver Politics there's so many opportunities with that to really get in contact with local officials wherever you happen to be, right? So yeah, there's a plethora of ways to get involved, and just kind of exploring the website is a great way to start for all those opportunities.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we've got to get that camper on the road on the campaign trail for Braver Angels, brother. I like the idea. Okay, excellent. Well, I'm going to pull one from chat here. James Kim would like to know what is unique about the Braver Angels relative to other bipartisan / depolarization focused groups / lobbies. I'm going to answer that question, but first I want to and thank you very much, James. I just want to pick up on the fact that James said, what is unique about the Braver Angels? And I just want to say, it's sort of a funny thing. I think many of you will, of course, remember, maybe most of you, but we started off as better angels, as in the better angels of our nature, as in the Abraham Lincoln quote from his first inaugural address. And the idea of better angels refers to sort of the facets of the human spirit that are aimed towards generosity and understanding and willingness to forgive and reconcile. And in the early days, people would ask us, they'd say, well, you guys are calling yourselves angels? And we'd say, no, we're not calling ourselves angels. It's got this metaphorical meaning. But then very quickly within the ranks, folks started saying, all right, angels, what are we doing today? And it's become such a sticky thing that at this point, I guess we just sort of roll with it, So we're not technically the Braver Angels, but I'm never mad when somebody throws it out there. But to the question, the main difference. So there are groups you might be familiar with, such as No Labels, for instance, and many others, that do work on forging cross-partisan consensus or compromise in Congress and maybe in other elected bodies with an aim towards sort of depolarizing politics on the level of policy. That's not, and that's, hey, that's great work, right? That's not necessarily what we do. There are two big differences between Braver Angels and other such organizations. One lies in the fact that, while I think, many of us, I'm speaking for myself, I would say this, while I think many of us likely feel that a functioning democracy is one in which political compromise is far easier to arrive at, because of the absence of interpersonal contempt that keeps us from being able to effectively reason together in the project of shared governance. Making sure that Republicans and Democrats actually vote together on specific bills, I think that's a very plausible outcome and perhaps a desirable outcome of the work of mending relationships. But it's sort of a different project as an exact kind of matter. So that's the first thing. We're not so much focused on depolarization on issues. And in fact, if a Republican and a Democrat come into our workshops, leave, come in completely disagreeing about policy, leave completely disagreeing about policy, but come away from it thinking of each other as trustworthy human beings who they can work with, regardless of whether or not they agree on an individual issue. That is a win in our book. It's part of the work of Braver Angels. And secondly, but perhaps no less importantly, we are grassroots, and our work extends not just to Congress, but to the kitchen table in a very direct sort of way. And we also deal with art and culture and music and narrative and media and all sorts of other things. And so I think that Braver Angels, we're a community. We're not a lobbying group per se, although we have, in the context of Braver Politics, something of a lobbying function for a depolarizing discourse, for a change in our culture of government. But we're much more than that. We are in people's homes and in people's communities. We are you, basically. It's great to be on Capitol Hill and working with the lobbyists and so on and so forth. And, all sorts of admiration for those groups. But we're in the soil, as it were. Okay, let's go next to Leslie Susan. Okay, go ahead and ask your question, Leslie.
Oh, okay, I did get unmuted.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I know quite how to put this, and it echoes something said earlier, but I joined Braver Angels some time ago, and I've been to a number of the debates and things. I haven't been to a Braver Politics event. And I read all these, emails, newsletter type things I get, and I've become increasingly uncomfortable with the organization. My sense is, and this maybe goes back to the question about, is there any limit on anti-Semitism? I mean, the concept that, and racism in general. I mean, I'm Jewish, I'm a mother of a Black daughter. I was trained as a mediator. I did lots of ADR work. I'm all for people having dialogue and opening channels of communication. I'm all for compassionate listening, for reflecting back what people are saying rather than making assumptions. All those things attracted me. But the idea that there is that people are assumed to have goodwill even when they make egregiously hurtful statements, and that there's no boundary set to either preserve, to me, civility goes beyond following rules about speaking to the moderator instead of to the other person. It also includes respect for all the people that you're speaking to and about. And I think that does require some guidance on what's considered a basic show of willingness to be, present and to be aware that you're talking to other humans with history. And the other piece that really bothers me is that there's no, as far as I can detect, no requirement of any willingness to commit to reality-based factual premises at the start. Debating policy is great. Debating the existence of reality, or simply making assertions about facts that are not reality-based, to me is not a debate or discussion about the best policy to deal with the situation. It's just a forum for the spread of false disinformation that to me is a big part of how we got here. And the third thing I will say is about this sense that we're trying to pull together to get, building bridges is great, but there seems to be this effort to pull the two sides together by suggesting that the moderate, the middle ground, the compromise in the center is always the good answer. And the incentive that's been created by that is that if one side goes further and further to an extreme, the center keeps shifting in that direction. So all of us should keep compromising to try to catch up with the swing. I don't think it's a both sides issue.
Leslie,
that's it.
Yes. Allow me to jump in. I let you go a bit long because you were voicing some very deep and profound questions, and I want to honor the points that you were making because I know that they're heartfelt and sincere. On the last point, I'll just say very quickly about meeting in the middle that I was sort of trying to speak to that a moment ago by saying that our work really isn't about trying to push people towards centrist compromise, right? That in certain cases that may be an outcome of it, but I wouldn't describe our work in that way. But to the first 2 points that you made, you made a point about people being assumed to have goodwill, even if they are capable of perhaps making statements that perhaps for a Jewish person such as yourself, perhaps for an African-American person such as myself, or somebody from any other group, might seem to be clearly marginalizing, clearly dehumanizing. And so I hear you when you say that there's a discomfort with that. And you also made a point that's not exactly the same point, but is closely related about, well, what about people who are not living in factual sort of reality, so to speak, right? So, we could easily spend an hour on both of these points. I'm going to do the best I can in about 120 seconds or less to really sort of engage here, because this is important. I did say earlier that we do work and bring people in with a fairly wide latitude for entry, because if it were the case that ignorance, misunderstanding, and perhaps just sort of cultural or social unawareness were not so prevalent and such a part of the problem in our discourse at present, there would be no need for the work that we do in the first place. But that does sort of require a certain comfort with discomfort. And I recognize the fact that, that doesn't make things easy. I remember in one of our Braver Angels events, we had a fellow, heck, he might even be on this call right now, a great guy in my estimation, but a fellow who made a point that I knew some others in the room were going to have some objection to, about African Americans not valuing family and fatherhood. And he made this statement in a panel where we had a number of religious leaders, including African American religious leaders, present. And I remembered sort of observing the fact that we had one or two folks who seemed to be feeling that, I saw this through messages and so forth, that this is somebody who shouldn't be allowed to ask a question. Then one of our participants, who was from the same part of the country as this fellow, similar generation, so forth, told him he heard what he was saying, he understood why he was saying it, and then proceeded to tell the story of his own life and experience as a father of Black children, somebody who deeply values fatherhood, someone who deeply values family, and somebody who believed that this reputation that sometimes Black men find themselves inheriting of not caring for their families is one that isn't speaking to the deeper truth of the Black experience and of Black culture. Now, I don't report that story to take a side in terms of what position, or other I take on that for the purposes of this conversation. Feel free to ask me that question any other time, by the way. The reason I mention it is because through and this was the late Bishop Omar Jawar, he's passed now. You can go back and find this. This is from an earlier America's Public Forum event that I think is still up on YouTube. But his willingness to engage that individual's comment in a way that did not dismiss him for having the perspective caused him to genuinely listen. And you could see it, you could feel it in the moment. That bridge was built, and to a certain degree, that bridge seemed to be crossed, right? We have to be able to have the conversations. There's just no other way around it. No, there is another way around it. We can allow our institutions to break apart and open the door potentially for not just the breaking of relationships, but the violence that can come from misunderstanding. Dr. King spent a lot of time speaking to frankly racist white folks, right? Who did not look at him as being their equal as a matter of race, and yet he was willing to humanize them and engage them. And that worked, I would argue. On the other point, I would say that, misinformation is a tremendous problem in American democracy. But if you spend time in conservative and progressive circles, part of what you'll learn is that each side thinks that the other side is guilty of it. And so when we enter into these conversations about facts, about issues, it is important for us, insofar as it is important for democratic society, for us to get to the point to where we can reason together clearly so that we can observe empirical truth. But I think that the basic sort of starting point that we bring to this subject of Braver Angels is the observation which says that it is impossible to sustain those sorts of conversations without there being first an essential layer of trust between people, where I can say that I believe that the facts that you are telling me, I may or may not think that they're correct, but I'm willing to listen to you because I don't think that you are trying to deceive me, if that makes sense. I don't think that you are trying to say something so you can hurt me or so you can take advantage of me. See, the thing is for folks on the right listening to many sort of mainstream media outlets, and certainly for folks on the left listening to many sort of conservative podcasters and politicians and personalities and so forth, there is the sense that these people aren't just wrong, they're lying. I don't trust them. So Leslie, even if you have the facts on an issue, and you very well may, so long as folks who are politically opposite from you look at you and say, well, I know that she's lying to me because of the way she votes or because of her politics, then all the facts in the world just will never translate to a deeper understanding of what reality is, right? Yes, we could talk a lot more about this. I want to honor exactly what you're saying because I know where it comes from, but I would ask you to bear with us a bit longer and to help us push this confidence in trust to the point to where maybe, just maybe, we can begin to see it bear fruit in its ability to unlock the gates of reason, the reason that we can share as people who come to trust each other, not necessarily as authorities to start with, but as fellow human beings who mean each other well. Okay, I went a bit longer than I meant to, but I felt that Leslie's question was truly important. Let's go next to Alex Weissenfels. I hope I'm getting that right.
Yep, that's right. Thanks a lot, John. So my question is, how much are Braver Angels and Braver Politics prioritizing equipping people with concepts to quickly identify and affirm each other's values and frame situations constructively? And are there opportunities to help with that? And, I can go a bit into the reason I ask, because this addresses Leslie's points as well, because we need to have values-based conversations before we can start talking about facts, and also because we can get people who profess hate to walk that back to the fundamental fears that hate is based on, so we can take steps to address that fear. So is there a role for this? Because I haven't seen one in Braver Politics yet.
Right.
Could I jump in on that?
Go for it, Doug, and Randy, if there's something very quick you want to add to that, you may, but go ahead, Doug.
I just want to say in the Red Blue workshop we did in New Hampshire that I mentioned, this was the core of the activity. What are the values? What are the values that brought you to politics and that drive your discussion? And this is a very fruitful way to have a conversation with people who maybe haven't really talked to each other before. And I was facilitating a group where they were talking about the Depression, how the Depression had shaped their families, and yet they had interpreted it in different ways. So yes, I think values is really core to this process.
Indeed. And I am noticing that we're running low on time. Randy, was there something you wanted to add to that very quickly, or are you good on that?
Real quick, I do think that values is a thread that runs through everything that we do. And so we are always trying to encourage people to be curious about someone else's values, but especially how those values are expressed based on which side of the aisle they or what part of the political spectrum that they fall on. So we are constantly trying to reinforce that we share so many values, we have so much common ground, but it may look a little bit different depending on your perspective.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for the question, Alex, and it's a good one. Okay, let's see. Quick question from chat from Muhammad Al-Khatib. I hope that I got your name mostly right. Has anyone at Braver Angels spoken to any members of Congress, especially the House Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress? And that is an easy one. The answer to that question is yes. The Select Committee for the Modernization of Congress is a group within Congress that is seeking to essentially achieve a depolarizing of Congress on the level of the interpersonal relationships of elected members. And they've been a wonderful resource for us, and they've taken a larger interest in the general sort of bridge building field. And so we've got good friends there. Anything, Randy or Elizabeth, you might want to add to that?
Yeah, so Bill has been working extensively with folks on that committee. I was actually set to fly to DC last week to run a workshop where they recruited folks. Unfortunately, I got COVID, so I had to cancel my whole trip, but we still are planning to do that. And so yes, they have been an amazing partner for us.
Outstanding. Okay, excellent. And forgive me, folks, questions come pretty hard and fast in chat and on the screen. And so sorting through them quickly, but we are running low on time because there are a couple of things we want to do before we wrap up. So let's see if we can't get two in. I see Whitney Johnson. I'm going to go to you first. And I also, oh goodness, it's like picking between my children. I feel so bad about this. Okay, Whitney Johnson, and then Lynn Breslow. And if we have time for another, we can do that. So Whitney, go ahead and ask us your question.
Thanks so much, John. Maybe more of a Braver Angels than a Braver Politics question, so bear with me. But I just wanted to ask, related to social media and Braver Angels' presence there. Of course, we want to get people through the door and into amazing meetings like this. But I think we all agree that the rise of social media and the rise of polarization are not a coincidence. So I'm really interested in how that channel that's been such a huge part of the problem could maybe be also part of the solution in the future. So I was interested in how, if you have any success stories on how to make Braver Angels style civil discourse go viral. And maybe to put a pin in that, is Braver Angels going to be focusing more in the future on making shareable and compelling content that at least gets people through the door to help in that making depolarization go viral?
Yeah, there you go. Well, the answer to that latter question is absolutely and emphatically yes. We've had a bit of a ragtag media operation that I think is moving towards some more sophistication. We've got a little bit of funds coming into the Braver Angels podcast at the moment, and so I think that you're going to see a relaunch of that in short order. Monica Guzman has done a tremendous job of recruiting interns, college students, folks who are pretty effective on Instagram and the social media outlets that I'm too aged to relate to as much as you might think. We have also a social media workshop. You'll have to forgive me because I'm not deeply familiar with it, but this merits its own subject of discussion. And so look forward to a future member meeting in which we dive into this subject in particular, because we do have activities. Some of them are nascent. Looks like we've got a link in the chat Randy has circulated for our social media workshop. And so if folks are interested, they can check that out. We've had conversations on the podcast with Tristan Harris from the Center for Humane Technology, the Social Dilemma documentary on Netflix, folks may be familiar with, and we've entered into some conversations looking to help the issue of depolarization in the digital space. And so, things are early stage, but they are growing. Thank you very much, Whitney. Next, Lynn, very quickly, if you would.
Yes. After a Braver Angels workshop, and I assume, though it's new, after Braver Politics event with politician, people are pretty moved and excited. They seem to see people from the other side differently. But could Braver Angels provide a little information at the end and let them know that these people aren't, self-selected? They aren't stooges in an experiment. These people are more typical, are actually pretty typical, because they're going to then people are then going to their medias, including social media, and they'll see polarized images of the other side. And it's good for them to know, I would think, that these aren't typical. Those polarized images, only 1% of the population watches Tucker Carlson, and that's a lot. That's a pretty high viewership. That these are the extremes, and the people you've met in your workshop are really more typical. People you come to appreciate.
Got it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lynn. And I think that the point about Tucker Carlson, to my mind at least, is relevant, not because everybody watches Tucker Carlson or Lawrence O'Donnell, or is Lawrence O'Donnell still, your favorite host on MSNBC and so forth. It's not to say that everybody watches those programs as polarizing or seeking to be polarizing. Rather, at least to my mind, it's just the fact that most of us are not necessarily stuck in front of cable news all day, one way or the other, And when it comes to our elected officials, I'd like to think that most of them are like most of us insofar as what we care most about is actually elevating the quality of life of our neighbors, right? And the American people, rather than fighting culture wars or political wars for their own sake. But I think that what we have to do is tell the stories of those people on the grassroots levels and elected officials and candidates and so forth. We've got to share their stories because otherwise they don't get shared, right? And we have to find ways to amplify that so people can see that and again, it's not to say that polarization is not deep and severe, but there is a way in which, as bad as polarization is, it does get worse in part because we keep saying it's even worse than it is in terms of how we actually feel about each other, right? So it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we've got to show folks there are people out there who are fulfilling a different sort of prophecy. And that's the idea that in a country as diverse as ours, that out of many, we really can be one. So I think that's the best I can do with that in the amount of time that we have. Folks, I want to thank you all sincerely. We are not done yet. Randy, enlighten us as to where we go now.
Yeah, so I've got a little treat for everyone. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to spotlight my own video because I wanted to introduce a feature to this meeting that we really hope to have more of in the future. We're using OwlCam technology. And you can see that there's a 360-degree view of my place here. And I have two of my friends from our local alliance. I have Mary Thomas Valens. Some of you might know her as Mary TV. Say hello, Mary.
Hi there, everybody.
And hopefully it'll eventually focus in on Mary. We also have Susan Rico here, who has done some engineering on this amazing OWL 360 camera. And I wanted to give them a chance to talk about what we're doing in our local alliance and in the local region here. So Susan, I was going to toss to you first, but actually the two of you can kind of take it away and talk about what we're doing.
I'll go for it. Thanks, Randy. So quickly, BA in Southern California is holding a series of events on the shared American values of freedom, justice, and equality and what they mean from different perspectives. We've already had a great event on freedom, and events on justice and equality are in the works. Many thanks to Barbara Farmer and her work on that. Also, we recently participated in a music festival called Lightning in a Bottle. Craig Lincoln was part of a panel discussion there that generated lots of interest in Braver Angels. And several BA SoCal folks recently attended a book discussion with Monica Guzman on her wonderful new book, which I highly recommend, it's great, called I Never Thought of It That Way. It was held, thanks to John Wood Jr., at a wonderful place called Strive in South Central Los Angeles that is doing just amazing work with kids of many ages, and the kids were all really into the book discussion there. And finally, BA SoCal is hoping to have an in-person common ground workshop on abortion in the near future. And Mary, you take it from there.
Yeah, people mentioned getting teenagers involved in the chat, and Randy and I, with a team of moderators, did an in-person event after a controversy. This is where Braver Politics can really enter in. There was a controversy about a yearbook, very Trump-Biden controversy, and parents were mad. And we did a workshop with 600 high school seniors in person in small groups of 40 on skills for challenging conversations. And what was so profound is the students told us they actually in their lifetime did not know that people could have conversations with civility on tough conversations. It was a profound. At that same school, the principal said her teaching staff of 100 had never had real issues in the staff lounge over politics, and they were increasingly becoming polarized. So we did a depolarizing within workshop with 100 teachers, and more work is doing that. We also did a common ground workshop in person on how to teach race and racism in public schools. And we had a broad section of people from all over Southern California. And it was done with this OWL technology where we had in-person live participants and a huge group of observers from all across the country. So Randy, I don't know if I have time to go on, but we are doing lots of things all over the place.
Yeah, there's too much to talk about right now, but I just wanted to give people a preview of the kind of thing that we'd like to do. And we're going to be allowing alliances around the country. We're going to be talking about this on our next field meeting, to access these cameras. So we're very excited about that. And with that, I want to toss it back to John to kind of wrap us up.
Thank you very much, Randy. Thank you very much, SoCal folks. And really, really glad to have you join us here tonight. Yes, I'm very grateful to all of you for being willing to take this time. We've got, I think I've got 3 calls to action for folks if you're looking for something to do when you hang up here. The first, if you are so moved, get involved in Braver Politics. I believe that we've got the link in the chat, but if you go to braverpolitics.org, or if you just go to the Braver Angels homepage, you'll see your path towards learning more about Braver Politics and how you can get engaged directly. The second thing I would say is that we have, I think, some folks on this call this evening who are subscribers, but not yet members. If you are a subscriber and not yet a member, we would love for you to take the next step. Braver Angels is still evolving. We are still growing. And, you know, it's been 5 years, and what we've accomplished, in my mind, really is remarkable. And yet, we have only begun. And if you could see where we started and where we are now, 10,000 members across the country, 80 local bipartisan or multi-partisan alliances across America, activities on college campuses across America, workshops rolling out in Congress, media content, a loyal following, the things that we can do in a moment in which it is needed most really do, I think, serve as cause for hope and optimism in terms of the kind of society we can realize, not just us at Braver Angels, but all Americans, working together to humanize one another across the divides. And so the final thing I would ask is just for folks to stay involved, stay engaged. Maybe you can't volunteer tomorrow as a part of Braver Politics or organizing or putting on a workshop. But if all you do is just continue on as a member, share our material online, tell your aunt and your uncle or your neighbor or your professor about what it is we do, and continue to pay attention, I guarantee you this is an impactful community that is here to support you, that is here to be in relationship with you, with a common desire to heal our democracy. And Lord knows that we need it. And so I thank you all so very much for being here with us today. And I hope that you join us possibly next month. Look out for the updates. But it's our pleasure to be in this work with you, building a house united. And so until next time, take care, everyone, and be safe.